Guys, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, man. This patch looks really bad. It looks really bad. It looks so bad, man. And I hate to say it, because, like, I don't like how doomer we've been recently. I don't like it. And honestly, it's so annoying, because I genuinely think the Season 9 changes did so much good for the game. And it feels like we don't even have to do that much to get the game to a good state. I know there's probably not many people who believe me there, but I really feel like, especially in Season 10, we are so close to some peak Overwatch. There's only some small changes you'd have to make to fix everything. Okay, well, maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but yeah, get the game to at least a really good state. But the thing is, those few changes not being there is just making all the difference, you know? Okay. So yeah, I honestly thought that Season 10 was overhated. I thought Season 10 was great, but I'm not looking forward to Season 11, I'm not going to lie. These patch notes look really bad. So let me get through this, because I already tried to record this once, and I went on a 20-minute rant about the design philosophy the developers have gone with Tank, without even reading a single patch note. And then realised I'd gone 20 minutes without even starting to read the patch notes. So, yeah, let's start with that. Whenever two enemies like clash into each other with like a bash move, like Reinhardt, Doomfist, Brigitte, Mauga, and they knock each other down, they're both knocked down and stunned for 1.7 seconds now instead of 2. This is technically a good change, but it doesn't matter a single fucking bit, because seriously, a 0.3 second reduction. You could literally reduce this to 1 second and people would like it. Why don't you have the balls to go further than that? Why is it always like a 0.02312 second reduction? No. Just halve it. Just do 1 second, or at least 1.5. Why do we have to do 1.7 seconds? What's going on here? But whatever. Technically a good change, just pretty damn irrelevant. D.Va, developer comments, basically the armor changes they did in the mid-season where they reverted back to the Overwatch 1 armor, which halves the damage against pellet weapons, but barely does any damage reduction against more, like, slow burst damage weapons. That led to D.Va being way worse because she obviously has a pellet weapon, so all of her pellets do literally half damage to armor now. So they buffed D.Va to have tighter spread on her fusion cannons, and to do an extra 10 damage with her boosters when she bonks into someone. These are good changes, actually, especially the spread. I'm interested to see, because whenever they reduce D.Va's spread, like even just a small amount, it massively improves like how much damage you can do with the character. But considering the recent tank changes with the armor and the headshot reduction, I don't know if it actually makes D.Va good, because like I feel like she's going to be still really struggle to tear through armor. I think she's really fucked against armor right now. But at least these are technically good changes, and it is nice that it means that D.Va's going to spend less time bullying tanks and is going to get more value out of focusing on armored, squishy targets. I guess that's nice. Junker Queen, okay. Fuck, man, I really just want to read these without getting into the weeds, but like I already have to get into this. Okay, so, the mid-season patch last season, I nearly made a video on it, but I didn't end up doing it. Because I was too scatterbrained and I feel like I didn't have a solid point to make, and ironically enough, now that it's passed, I feel like I now have all the points in the world to make. So, in the mid-season last season, they reverted armor back to working how it did in Overwatch 1, again, being way more effective against lots of little hits, to the point where it literally makes you take twice as long to die against little hits, but basically doing nothing against big hits. Whereas before, at the start of Overwatch 2, they changed armor to just be 30% flat damage reduction against everything. Long story short, most flankers in the game tend to use pellet weapons or shotguns or blah blah blah, so for the most part flanking characters do a lot worse now against armor, but poking characters like Cass, Ashe and Widow do way better. As well as the armor changes, they reduce the damage that headshots do to tanks by 25% for a total of changing the headshot multiplier from double damage to 1.5 times damage, and they also made it so that tanks take 50% reduced knockback now instead of 30%. And at the time that rework dropped, it was a bit weird. On one hand, I was a bit like, I'm happy they're trying this, because it's quite ballsy to go for this, and, you know, I'm glad they're trying to fix tank. But something just felt wrong about it. It really just kind of felt like it wasn't really hitting the things that made tank unfun. And I was thinking maybe I'm being a bit harsh when I was initially making the video, and that's a lot of the reason why I was very scatterbrained in making my points and decided not to make a video on it, because I really didn't know if I was being too harsh on the patch, and I really didn't know if I fully agreed with where they were going, but like I genuinely feel like I couldn't like articulate the problems well. But now, having played in the patch, I think it's safe to say their attempt to fix tank in the mid-season was a failure. I will say this at the very least, the headshot change wasn't a bad idea. I think the headshot change was like, that makes sense. It didn't really work out, though. It led to weird things happening, like D.Va and Reaper being terrible against Winston now, even though they've always traditionally been Winston counters. And a lot of situations where tanks in the fights with each other just literally can't skill diff each other because headshots matter so little that all they do is they just shoot each other, and whoever simply has the character with more health and damage wins every time. Though, to be honest, the headshot change isn't that bad. It is at least nice that you don't burst die anywhere near as often as a tank in situations where you probably shouldn't have. Don't get me wrong, like, I do think that not burst dying on tank is a skill, but even though it is a skill, sometimes you get bullshitted. Sometimes you just decide you want to play Roadhog, and you peek a corner for literally half a second, and you lose 700 HP before you even get to blink. And it's like, oh, okay, right, that was 700 HP right there, guess I'm dead. I mean, I thought I was safe to, you know, just very briefly peek this corner with literally 700 HP, but no, apparently it's all gone already. Thank you, Soujorn, very cool. And it's nice that doesn't happen that much, but that's all I can really say about it, is it's nice. It is nice, but it doesn't fix tank. And, of course, it also kind of made tank worse, because again, tank v tank matchups have less skill involved now. When you also factor in, well, the fact that the knockback reduction was added, oh god. Listen, the headshot one I could take or leave. A lot of people really don't like it. I personally mildly dislike it, and I think I principally agree it was probably a bad idea, but I wouldn't be that bothered if they kept the headshot one. I could go either way with it. The fucking knockback one, though. Okay. They said that one of the main frustrations with tank in their experience, like playing the role and understanding why people were frustrated with tank, was constantly getting booped around. And so they increased the knockback reduction that tanks have from 30% to 50%. God, I really hate to say this. I really hate to say this because it sounds like such like the typical soy rage. What are the developers doing? They don't do anything. And like, I literally started making Overwatch videos because there were so many times the developers made good changes at the start of Overwatch 2 that no one appreciated because people were too swept up on, look how shit Overwatch 2 is, look how bad 5v5 is, and there were loads of good changes happening. Again, I've mentioned it before in previous videos, but it's been a while since I said it. I genuinely think Season 3 of Overwatch 2 was the single best period of all of Overwatch history, and no one talked about it just because it was an off-season and it was quiet. But during that time, every character in the game was viable, and genuinely it was an extremely diverse and fun skill-based meta. People don't talk about it because it was an off-season, but Season 3 of Overwatch 2 was great. And I hate being that guy now who sits here and is like, do the devs even play their own game? But like, I kind of have to say it now. Do the devs even play their own game? Because it's like, everyone's been complaining about the state of tank for ages, and finally they're like, okay, we're going to do a patch to address this. And what do they take away from it? Oh yeah, the problem with tank is like all the knockback, and man, this Lucio just keeps booping me, man, that sucks. And it's like, I hate to say it, man, but it's the biggest skill issue in the world. I'm sorry, like, at the end of the day, getting booped as a tank, sure, it's annoying, but if you got booped, it's a skill issue. Like, it is very rare that you get fucked by a boop as a tank and it's not your fault. Like, I'm literally saying that as someone who's been playing non-stop tank in Season 10. Like, you know, I have all the reason to say, for my own selfish reasons, I love having the knockback reduction, because now I don't get booped off the stage. But at the end of the day, no, I care about this game being fucking skill-expressive, and at the end of the day, let's be real. For the most part, if you were getting screwed by boops as a tank, that shows that you're doing a really poor job of being a tank. It shows that you have bad positioning, bad awareness, and you aren't tracking people's cooldowns. Really, the only way in which getting booped can actually be a non-skill issue as a tank is if you do get unlucky and the enemy team is super coordinated and they, like, triple boop you. That's, like, the only time that I'm actually pissed off as a tank and I'm like, fucking boops. Every now and then that will happen. Like, you know, I'll be playing Ilios well and I'll be purposely avoiding getting booped into the pit, but then a Pharah will fly over my head, boop me out of position so I can't, like, stay in cover, and then on top of that, a Lucio will boot me further towards the, pit, and then, Orisa will spear me over, and it's like, okay, well, I knew that was going to happen, that's why I hid here, but, when I have to dodge the Pharah boop, the Lucio boop, and the Orisa boop, then it's kind of a bit too much. That's, the only situation in which I feel like it can be unfair and annoying, and, the worst part is, if people are that committed to booping you that they're going to, triple chain boop you, that's, the only time that you still die to boops with the knockback resistance. It's kind of the worst of both worlds now, because one boop never does anything anymore. But getting, triple booped still sometimes kills you, and it's still sometimes bullshit. This knockback reduction is just the worst of both worlds, and a big reason why I'm really against it is because a lot of tank v tank interactions, the few of them left that are actually skill-based, are often based on positioning and knockback. And now that tanks can't move each other at all with knockback, those interactions are gone. So as you're seeing on screen here, they're trying to address this, but they're not really doing it well. Because what I'm actually going to bring up as an example is, if you didn't know, Junker Queen actually has a slightly favourable matchup against Roadhog typically. This is a surprise to some people, considering Roadhog, in theory, can just two-shot Junker Queen, whereas Junker Queen can never kill the Roadhog, quote-unquote. And don't get me wrong, in a pure 1v1 sense, Junker Queen isn't super favoured against Roadhog, but in a team sense she is, because of the fact that Junker Queen has a very small hitbox, so it's very hard for Roadhog to connect all his pellets from his shotgun. Junker Queen also is very hard to hook, because her movement isn't predictable at all, it's just based on your strafes and key mashing, and so they can't predict your movements and hook in the direction you're moving, because you can snap your neck around and move another direction whenever you want at the press of a key. And on top of that, you're fast because of the fact you have shout. As a result, it's really hard to hook Junker Queen, and even if you do manage to hook her, you can't cancel shout with a hook. You still get the shout health and speed boost even if you get hooked mid-shout. And on top of that, with shout, you basically need to 3-shot Junker Queen, and considering she's faster than you, she's just going to run away after the first shot. As a result, alone as a Roadhog, it is really difficult to kill Junker Queen. And the fact that Junker Queen can hit all her shotgun pellets on you from medium range, but you can't hit all your shotgun pellets on her unless she comes to point blank range, which she never will, it actually means that although it takes ages for Junker Queen to kill Roadhog, a lot of the times she does slowly bleed the Roadhog out and tends to win in the end. But a big reason why she beats Roadhog isn't just her all anti-heals and that's good against Roadhog. No, a big reason why is because Roadhog never wants to be sitting out in the open trying to self-heal. If he's, if Roadhog is in danger of dying, he wants to dive into cover as quickly as possible, but he has no mobility. And so what really screws Roadhog is when he's just retreating around the corner to get healed, because maybe he got antied and he doesn't want to take the fight or whatever, and you get a knife on him before he gets around the corner, and you pull him back out from behind cover, and you kill him while he's antied. Things like that are great ways to counterplay Roadhog as Junker Queen, and this is an example of one of the few skill-based tank matchups still left in the game. Junker Queen versus Roadhog is a matchup where so long as you play Junker Queen competently, you're honestly slightly favoured against the Roadhog despite how oppressive it looks from the outside looking in, and as a result it's a very fair matchup. But what did adding this tank knockback thing do? It made it so that now Jagged Blade can't pull Roadhog for shit, so when he gets to dive behind a wall for cover, even if you outplay him, land the knife, and he didn't think about the fact that you could use your knife to pull him out of cover, so you have thoroughly outplayed him in every way, it doesn't matter, because when you pull him he doesn't go anywhere, so he just walks into cover and lives. And now don't get me wrong, you might be thinking to yourself, well, why are you complaining? I mean, you're literally looking at it on the screen right now. They increased the pull force of Jagged Blade on tanks. The reason I'm complaining is, why is Jagged Blade the only ability in the game we're going to fix? Jagged Blade isn't the only one. There's plenty of other tank knockbacks that need to be fixed. Ball needs to do more knockback to tanks to be able to counterplay other tanks. Doomfist needs to do more knockback with his punch to be able to counterplay other tanks. Basically, every single tank knockback in the game needs to be able to do more knockback to other tanks to do their fucking job. Why are we just giving Jagged Blade the special treatment? Why is Jagged Blade the only tank cooldown in the game that deals knockback that's allowed to still move tanks? Not to mention, this is so, unintuitive. Now Jagged Blade just has double pull speed, but specifically against tank, only for it to get halved by the passive, so it's basically the same as before. Are you kidding me? Do you see how stupid this sounds when I'm saying it out loud? At the very least, the Rampage change is nice. This ultimate used to be very oppressive, and don't get me wrong, it is very powerful still in theory, but as people got better at counterplaying it and learned how to deal with Junker Queens more, it got surprisingly easy to counter, so giving it a slightly faster startup time is quite a nice quality of life change that should hopefully make it easier to use. Oh god. You know, I love how it didn't take very long for me to know this patch is going to be bad. Like, when I first just glanced at these patch notes, like just scanning at them, I saw D.Va and I was like, okay, wait, that's good. I saw Junker Queen, I was like, okay. And then I saw Orisa, and I saw this, and I'm like, we're fucked. You can't be serious. You're kidding me. We're fucked. This is so bad. Okay, listen. Oh my god. So, I'll just read it first. Developer comment. Orisa's survivability was reduced more than necessary trying to find the one person in the entirety of the Overwatch community who agrees with this statement. Trying to find the person who asked moment, anyway, in her last round of changes. So we're partially reverting the cooldown increase to Javelin Spin. What the fuck, man? What the fuck? Okay, let me explain why this change is so bad. Because it's just 1 second. It really is just 1 second, but here's the thing. I, for the longest time, had this take that Orisa is bad, but also overhated. In that it is dumb that Orisa can cheese a lot of matches, but if you actually, you know, pick high-skilled tanks versus Orisa, and you play well, I do think you can outplay her. At the end of the day, so many people forget the weakness of Orisa. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if half of you watching don't even really know the weakness of Orisa, really, because no one ever talks about it. But I'm going to say it, and I know some people are going to disagree, but I literally have so much experience of seeing this weakness in play. The weakness of Orisa is that she is probably the single most high-resource tank in the game. She literally needs hard pocket to survive. But if she has it, she's immortal. That's why you can never kill Orisa, is because she quite literally, thanks to all her damage reduction and armor, gets more healing from getting the same amount of health from every single support in the entire game. Her effective HP from getting one Ana shot is more than any other tank in the game, because 70 health from Ana goes further with Orisa than any other character. As a result, Orisa is kind of useless when she has no heals, and an unstoppable fucking monster that cannot ever be beaten with practically anything in the game so long as she does get healed. As a result, the weakness of Orisa has always been just dive her back line. The only thing she can do to stop you is maybe throw a spear at you, and that will only stop you for about 0.5 seconds, and then you just go right back to melting her back line. And the second her back line's gone, she falls apart. Or at least that was the theory. But thanks to support power creep, you can't just kill her backline anymore. I think this is a huge reason why Season 3 is my, pick for peak Overwatch 2. Because I know that some people will say, hey, wasn't Season 3 the first season that Orisa became hard meta? Why would you say that Season 3 was so good? Don't we hate Orisa? Well, this is the thing, though. In Season 3, and I know this is going to be a hot take, I really do think that in Season 3, Orisa being hard meta was a skill issue. Because people say Orisa was hard meta, but I never had trouble with Orisa in Season 3, because that was before support power creep kicked in. And as a result, do you know what I'd do? I would just dive the Orisa's backline, and I won every fucking time. I very rarely lost to Orisa in Season 3, despite the fact she was the meta tank, because I would just focus her backline. In fact, I would get giddy and excited when the enemy tank panic swapped to Orisa when they started losing, because I knew that basically, locked in, we were going to win the game. Because the fact that they were panic swapping Orisa just meant, I had free license to tear apart their backline for the whole game. But then support power creep kicked in, and we never really addressed it. And as a result, now Orisa can't really be countered, and so Orisa became oppressive in Season 6, and Season 8, and Season 9, and now maybe again in Season 11. Lovely. But on top of that, another thing I realized is that while I don't completely go back on the idea that diving Orisa's backline is the way you counter her, I still think if you can do it well enough, you can still just beat Orisa. One thing I realized is that when I played Orisa myself, I realized that she'd crossed a line. She'd gotten to the point where she was so ludicrously strong at some point through all the power creep she's received, that while it used to be the case that without hard pocket she would collapse, a lot of the times, when in the brief times that I have played Orisa in the more recent seasons, I would find myself losing my supports, and I couldn't really do much about it because I'm playing a character that's terrible at defending the supports, but it just didn't matter. because while not having my supports there essentially put my life on a timer, where if I couldn't clean up the rest of the team fight in the next 15-20 seconds, I would almost certainly die, I was also now playing a tank that had ludicrous amounts of damage potential. As a result, so long as I played well, usually as Orisa, even if my supports and my backline got wiped out, I could usually wipe the remains of the enemy team after they tried to dive my backline out pretty single-handedly before I ran out of cooldowns and died. And a lot of the times, yes, I'd get close to dying and I'd barely live and finish off the team fight with like 100 or 200 health left. But at the end of the day, so long as I could just finish everyone off once they'd already used all their cooldowns and resources diving my supports, I could still win a disgusting amount on Orisa. And I think a real wake-up call for me, and I hate to say this because it sounds dumb, but I've had so much experience that reinforces this at this point. I'm kind of convinced that Orisa is actually more OP than I gave her credit for. It's just that most people pick Orisa as the switch your brain off tank, so they don't push her. I think that while Orisa is still generally a low skill expression tank, I actually think you can push Orisa pretty fucking far if you actually try on her. But a lot of people, because she is a pretty free value tank a lot of the time, kind of switch their brain off when they play her, and they don't abuse her as much as they potentially could. Anyway, the reason I'm saying all this is because, I'm not gonna lie, I went so long saying that I think that Orisa's counterable and you just need to dive her backline, and I still think that's half true, but I just had this moment where, like in Season 10, when I realised just how bad things had gotten with Orisa, I was so happy when they actually dropped the nuke on her. They dropped the hotfix where they massively nerfed Fortify and Javelin Spin, and I couldn't believe they finally had the balls to do it. Every single time they kept Orisa with the kitty gloves because she technically has a low win rate despite how much of a dumb character she is. And I really, really, really thought that they'd finally learned from their mistakes, and they finally learned, well, yeah, Orisa maybe has a low win rate, but that doesn't mean that she needs buffs. It's to do with the way the character's fundamentally designed, and the fact that no one actually wants to play her, they only swap to her when they're losing. I was so happy that they actually finally had the balls to actually hit her with the, nerf nuke. They didn't go soft on her, they really nerfed her hard. And I think one of the biggest wake-up calls in the world was after that enormous nuke of a nerf on Orisa, I was expecting she would just be a dead character. And the worst part is, she was still decent. I'm not going to say that Orisa was meta after that nuke. Obviously she wasn't. But she was honestly still kind of above average. Which is fucking terrifying. That we were able to drop the nerf nuke on Orisa, taking her Javelin Spin cooldown from 7 to 9 seconds, making her Fortify slow her down again, severely reducing the duration of Fortify, reducing the damage reduction it applied, making it not last as long. So many things that just made her so much worse, and she still wasn't even weak. And yet here we are, giving her back her Javelin Spin slowly but surely. I know it's literally a 1 second reduction, but I think this is terrifying. And I think a big thing as well is, it's no secret I watch a lot of flats. And one thing I'd like to mention is, the developers we actually know watch flats too. And that's one of the main things that's given me hope, is that I know that Team 4 listens to us, even if it might not seem like it sometimes. And a lot of the times it's felt like if they don't do what we want, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they literally can't for some stupid bureaucratic reason or whatever. But, balance isn't like that. And do you know what a very popular sentiment has become that Flats has been championing? The idea that at the end of the day, we simply cannot have a game where Orisa, Roadhog, and Mauga are the kind of tanks that are meta at high-level play. Sure, maybe you can allow them to be noob stompers, although that's arguably not even a good thing, but at the end of the day, you simply cannot have a healthy game where these three tanks are constantly meta. And let me ask you, how long has it been since we've had a meta where Orisa, Roadhog, or Mauga hasn't been one of the most dominant forces in the meta? Mauga's not even been here that long, but it just seems like it's a constant cycle of, okay, it's Orisa meta, now it's Roadhog meta, now it's Mauga meta, now it's Orisa meta, now it's Roadhog meta, now it's Mauga meta. And I swear, when this was pointed out, and when they dropped the nuke on Orisa, I really thought they were listening and they were learning. And now, look at what they're doing. They're nuking Roadhog, which to be fair, Roadhog need nuking, but they're buffing Orisa. So, have we learned anything? Have we learned anything here? It's like, we were literally complaining about how we just go in this circle of going from Roadhog to Mauga to Orisa, to Roadhog to Mauga to Orisa, to Roadhog to Mauga to Orisa, and we finally deal with Roadhog. And Mauga, we haven't really properly dealt with, but at least the armor changes made Mauga really bad against tanks that have armor, which means he's much less abusive against a lot of the tanks. He's still really dumb against some tanks, but at least he's a lot less bad than he used to be. But you know, in this state, we kind of almost, you know, we're kind of getting there. We're making Mauga a little bit less bad. And Roadhog getting nerfed, that would have been huge. If they didn't buff Orisa here, we would be in for a good season. But they just couldn't help themselves, could they? The Overwatch devs actually just can't go one fucking season without buffing Orisa, despite the fact that no one likes playing with Orisa. No one likes playing against Orisa. Everyone hates Orisa. And God, like, I feel so weird saying this, because, like, I don't even hate Orisa that much, quote-unquote. Like, I feel like I don't hate Orisa more than the average player. I think out of this trifecta, honestly, I used to think it was Roadhog, but at this point, I think Orisa is the least unhealthy out of this trifecta. Which isn't saying much, because all three of them are absolute garbage. But I guess the reason why I get so mad about Orisa all the time isn't even because I necessarily hate Orisa specifically that much, but just because it seems like they never learn with Orisa. I mean, they don't learn with the others either, but like at least with the others, it's like they haven't made the mistake that many times, even if it is still more than once. With Orisa, I swear they've made this mistake like 50 times within the span of 2 years. How do they keep making this mistake? How do they keep going, everyone hates Orisa and no one's having fun? Maybe we should finally nerf Orisa. Oh wait, Orisa's win rate dropped? Better buff Orisa. Wait, why is everyone miserable again now? And it's like, you know, when do we just accept that this game can't be fun if Orisa's good? When do we just draw that line, you know? It's ludicrous. Okay. Roadhog nerf, he got 50 less health. Is that open queue numbers? Oh, whatever. Either way. He got 50 less health, and his damage reduction on Take a Breather got reduced from 50% to 40%. This should have happened ages ago. I'm not gonna lie, the 50% damage reduction... I don't remember. If I remember right, I think they got the 50% damage reduction when they did the mid-season 9 patch, where they also reduced the anti-heal on the DPS passive to 15%. He should never have gotten 50% damage reduction on Take a Breather, and at the very least, I can kind of get it if they were like, well, 20% anti-heal is scary, so we're going to do it for a bit and see if it works, and then revert it if it doesn't. But the fact that they gave him 50% damage reduction when the 20% anti-heal wasn't even there, it was 15%, like, what the hell, man? Yeah, 50% damage reduction on Take a Breather was a mistake, and it never should have been there. 30% was too low, 50% was way too high, 40% should hopefully be the sweet spot. So at least this is good. But I just ring so hollow when I know that it doesn't mean we're free from, like, this trifecta of Mauga, Roadhog, Orisa, Mauga, Roadhog, Orisa, Mauga, Roadhog, Orisa. Because the second that Roadhog's out, oh, hey, look, Orisa's back in, lovely. Okay. Cass. Okay, Cass has been the demon of this game recently. It's kind of hilarious. He's been useless for almost all of Overwatch 2, and now suddenly he's become arguably the single best DPS in the game, no joke. Just because Hinder has that little counterplay and is that devastating in the current meta. Now don't get me wrong, there is actually complex reasons why that is. It's not just that, like, Hinder was always overpowered. In fact, Hinder was overpowered for the vast majority of Overwatch... Sorry, underpowered for the vast majority of Overwatch 2. But there's a reason why it's overpowered now. The DPS passive did make a positive change to the meta. It made it so that two things were far, far more important in the game. Range and mobility. And that is healthy. That is good. But that means that the two kind of team comps that are going to be really good are going to be Poke, because it has range, and Dive, because it has mobility. Rush, on the other hand, is going to suffer, because Rush needs lots of healing to work, and the healing's getting reduced by the DPS passive, and Rush tends to have poor, like, range and not the best mobility either compared to Dive. To compensate, the idea is that they just have loads of damage and loads of health. But, I mean, that's not really what works in Season 9 onwards. As a result, Rush has suffered, and I'm kind of neutral to Rush, you know. I like Dive, I dislike Poke, I'm neutral to Rush. But either way, at the end of the day, that meant that the meta recently has been a bit of a weird, like, Poke-Dive hybrid. Because both Poke and Dive are meta, but certain things shut off Poke and certain things shut off Dive, so you kind of adapt to the circumstances. As a result, you tend to either run Poke when you can get away with it, Dive when you can get away with it, or most commonly, you run a kind of a mix of both, and that way you can't easily be counterpicked and have your game plan kind of be shut down. And if you don't believe me, think about the fact that Tracer Cassidy is everywhere at top ranks and all that, and it helps put things in perspective. Tracer and Cass technically want to be doing completely different things. Cass, of course, wants to be poking, and Tracer wants to be diving. But the thing is, it kind of works still, because the enemy's also going to want to dive, and they're also going to want to poke. For the poke, you got the Tracer to deal with the poke, and for the dive, you got the Cassidy to deal with the dive. You get the idea. So essentially the reason that Cass is so good in the current meta and so just unquestionably the most valuable DPS in the game is the fact that he can poke and abuse his range to be able to keep the DPS passive on people, but also he has Magnade, which is a free button you can use to switch off anyone who uses dive against him, the thing that shuts off poke. Poke is supposed to be countered by dive, and yet they've made Cassidy a poke character that has a button that kills dive characters for free, and the dive characters can't do shit about it. Kind of a stupid design decision from step one, but here we are. Now, in fairness, oh god, I'm opening another can of worms here, but I'm going to admit to something I said, which was probably wrong. I will say, I never imagined it like this, but still. A while ago, all the way back in like Season 3 or something, I said that, honestly, I wouldn't mind if they made it so that Magnetic Grenade, this is before Hinder even existed, didn't stun you, but it did disable your movement abilities. So you might be like, oh, fuck, did you will this into existence? Like, did you say, like, Hinder would be a great mechanic, and then they added Hinder? And yes and no. I still take responsibility for this statement. Obviously, it probably didn't do anything, but, you know, it's still, like, you know, you could say it wasn't the best take. Essentially, the main distinction, though, is, and I still kind of stand by this, I don't think Hinder would be anywhere near as stupid as it is if it only disabled you from using more mobility once it's stuck. I think the thing that's stupid about Hinder is it not only happens automatically with auto-aim, but on top of that, it disables current movement abilities you've already used and are in the process of, like, doing. Like, when I conceptualized this sort of mini version of Hinder in my head before Hinder even existed, I just imagined it as, say you're ball and you're rolling into a Cass. If you get hindered, you still can't use Grappling Hook until the Hinder wears off. But if you're already rolling, it doesn't just stop you, you know? You keep going. I never imagined Doomfist would come flying at a Cass trying to punch him into a wall, and the Cass would drop a light little fucking piece of metal in front of his face, and he would stop dead in his tracks, you know. I would expect that the punch would go through, but after the punch was done with, he wouldn't be able to leap out. That would be a lot more fair. The fact that Hinder doesn't just prevent you from using more mobility, but also auto-aims and cancels your current mobility, is what's bullshit about it, in my opinion. But anyway, Cass has needed some serious nerfs. And they kind of... Okay, it's not that these changes are bad, they're just too light. This is pussy shit, I'm just gonna say it. This is just... Have some balls. Make a real change. Actually change the way the game feels. Please. So, okay, they reduced the damage of Fan the Hammer. That is pretty good, actually. Fan the Hammer was secretly a stupid ability, and honestly, I do feel a bit vindicated, because I remember early in Overwatch 2, everyone said that now that Cass doesn't have Flashbang, Fan the Hammer is useless, and I never agreed with that. I always thought that Fan the Hammer was honestly kind of overpowered, but no one really gave it the credit it deserved, and it could melt tanks scarily fast. And lo and behold, Fan the Hammer needed to be nerfed, because it turns out having 350 instant burst damage that you can instantly refill with a dodge roll to do 700 burst damage as a character that can already poke at long range and has CC, that's also pretty slow to kill for a DPS. Turns out, when you add all those things together, it kind of makes the perfect tank bully character. Try and deal with him at long range, you're shit at long range and he's good at long range. Try and get in his face, he CCs you and fans the hammer at you and does 700 burst damage before you can even use any of your abilities to get out of there. Try and burst kill him, he just hits dodge roll and tanks it with the damage resistance. Quite literally just zero counterplay. Speaking of which, combat roll damage resistance. Remember in Season 7 when they thought it would be a hilarious idea to give him 75% damage resistance on dodge roll? Yeah, that was funny, wasn't it? Well, here we are, change reverted. I mean... I kind of like dodge roll to, like, survive pulse bomb. But other than that, I am honestly at the point of just thinking, do we just, like, remove damage reduction on dodge roll? Like, who cares? Like, Who likes damage reduction on dodge roll? I think that's the only thing I like about it. I like that you can survive a D.Va bomb sometimes, and sometimes you can survive a pulse bomb with it. That's about it. Other than that, I feel like damage reduction on dodge roll is just bullshit, you know? I actually don't remember. If Cass's head hitbox is vulnerable during dodge roll, I don't mind disabling his head hitbox during dodge roll. But damage reduction, nah. I don't like that. Anyway, you know how, like, the whole point of Overwatch 2 was, like, you know, less CC? Okay, multiple points, of course, but, like, one of the big things was less CC, and that was actually one of the things we praised it for when it first came out, was the fact that there was less CC. And, you know, if you go all the way back to one of my first Overwatch 2 videos, when I was really hopeful and excited about Overwatch 2, one of the reasons I said that is because I never thought they would have the balls to remove the stun from Brig's Shield Bash and Cass's Flashbang. Because those specific stuns were so integral to the way the characters played, I just thought they'd never have the balls to change it, even though it was always going to be a bad thing for the game. And when they finally changed it, I was like, oh my god, I can't believe it, this is so good, this is great for the game. And then they went right back, didn't they? They decided to give Brig her stun back on her ultimate, and they decided to give Cass Hinder. You know, and it's like, okay, the reason I'm bringing this up is because we come full fucking circle. Flashbang is the new ability to replace Magnetic Grenade. And you know what? It's literally the same ability from Overwatch 1, except now it hinders instead of stuns. I'm not joking. We went back to Overwatch 1 Cass, except we replaced stun with Hinder, which is actually worse, by the way, because Hinder lasts longer than stun. I'm not kidding. So, quite literally, we just made Flashbang worse. Like, Christ. You know, like... How did we get here, you know? How did it get this bad?
Okay, holy shit, I am sorry, guys. I had to add this in post. Usually, if I forget to mention something, I think, whatever, I'll just leave it, but this I cannot leave. I forgot to even talk about the fact that not only have they effectively just gone back to Overwatch 1 Flashbang, but made it worse by making it a hinder instead of a stun, which might not be as hard as a stun, quote-unquote, but also lasts longer than stun. But I forgot to mention, they fucking buffed Hinder. Do you see that? The movement speed reduction on Hinder has been increased from 30 to 50%, and also now, while you're hindered, you can't even move while crouching. Like, how... I just don't understand the brains of these developers sometimes, man. Like, I'm still, like, having Vietnam flashbacks to the Season 4, like, dev blog, when they said, quote-unquote, we feel there is more room for CC in this game. All the way back when they tried to make Mei freeze again, well, not quite, but, like, you know, sort of freeze again, and when they gave, like, even added Hinder to the game, and I'm just thinking, like, do they ever think back on the fact that no one's been happy with the game since that statement? Do they really think about that, you know? Like, it's almost like CC inherently makes everyone who plays this game miserable, and having less of it was a good thing, and adding more of it back into the game was a really fucking bad idea that no one really wanted. You know, it's almost like that's the case. Like, I genuinely don't know, like, what's going on here. Considering that, like, they had to have the balls to remove CC in the first place when they started Overwatch 2, so they had to understand that removing CC was a good thing. But then the first thing they gotta do is give Brig her stun back on ult, and give Cass her stun back, but now it's a hinder instead of a stun, and we'll just make it last longer and slow extremely hard, and it's like... Just what... Again, this is the thing that makes me so mad. It's not even things are bad. If things were just bad, but there was hope for things getting better, I would not care as much. But it's the fact that it looks like they're actively learning in reverse. They learn what the correct thing is, they do it briefly, they see the correct thing isn't quite perfect, even though it's basically the best thing you can do. Because in fairness, yes, there were a couple loud idiots early in Overwatch 2's life who said that they preferred Flashbang on Cass for the CC because they don't like how they can never kill anyone when they get in their faces Cass anymore because they can't land their shots. And don't get me wrong, I can sympathize with you if you can't land shots, if you're trying to play a less aim-based character, but this is a shooter game, so aim always becomes important. Like, if you're trying to play Ana, and mostly just because you like Nade and Sleepdog or whatever, and you like supporting your team, but you just can't land all your shots, I can sympathize a bit. But if you're playing Cass, like, you know, the fucking DPS who has a pistol, you know, all he does is shoot people and you can't aim. Like, I do think at that point, I do have to say, yeah, it sounds kind of like a skill issue. It sounds like we should probably not design the game around you. But of course, there were some people who just really like getting free kills on people by landing stupid flashbangs on them, and we catered to them. And, you know, it's just like... I just get the feeling that's what happened, that they saw, okay, what happens when we have no CC? Well, most people are happy, but some people are mad because they can't get free kills by pressing a button anymore. Okay, what happens when we have CC? Everyone's mad. You know what? Clearly none of these solutions are perfect. We'll try and go for a happy middle ground to make everyone happy. Hey, why is nobody happy?
At the very least, there's one good change here, but even the good change isn't really good. This change is to make Deadeye a bit more useful, and a little bit less stupid. Deadeye, a while ago, got 40% damage reduction while being used, so that you didn't just die when you popped it. But that also meant that sometimes it'd be used in stupid situations where you're not even flanking, you just stand right in front of the enemies and use Deadeye to tank a shot with the 40% damage reduction, and then kill them with the Deadeye, which was kind of dumb, but people would do it. So now they changed it so that you do still have the damage reduction, but now it decreases over time to 0% eventually. And as well as that, you now get a slow speed boost that does the opposite. It builds up over time. So the longer you stay in Deadeye, the less damage reduction you get, but the more speed you get. This is a cool trade-off. I like this from a pure gameplay perspective, but I've got to say, Blizzard absolutely loves to buff characters when they're trying to nerf them. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, Cass is extremely overpowered and everyone hates them. Maybe we should do something about that. And then it's like, okay, well, we're going to do a teeny little nerf here and a teeny little nerf there. We're going to rework this ability, and then let's just buff him. You know, it's just like, they can never just nerf a character, can they? They're always going to be like, oh, but let's just sneak in this cool little buff while we're at it, you know? Oh my god. Mei got a small buff, but even then they got a nerf as well. Her damage on a secondary fire got increased from 75 to 85 since the health changes made it so that Mei could never kill anyone. But they also made the projectile size smaller, which is a little bit confusing, but okay. I guess it probably was relatively easy to land icicles with the size increase, but I didn't think it was that easy, but I don't know. Either way, Reaper got some small buffs. Reaper was doing real bad because the armor changes destroyed him. So they decided to make it so he's got a little bit less weapon spread on his shotguns, and his Shadow Step cast time has been sped up a little bit from 1.5 to 1.2 seconds, but we're still waiting on the Reaper rework. I really hope that's coming mid-season, but I have a scary feeling it's not. Okay. An Oasis. I know that we're really used to, like, seeing Soujorn in the patch notes and just instantly, like, our heads hit the fucking table and we go, oh! I know we're used to that, but, like, credit where it's due. They finally nerfed Soujorn. It took us a million years, but we're here. Railgun's secondary fire damage scaling has been reduced from 30 to 130 damage down to 1 to 100. That means a fully charged railgun headshot now only does 150 damage. Before, it did 195. That's actually a pretty significant reduction. They also made it so her primary fire shoots faster, so that her normal shots are going to be more effective. And they also made it so that you now can pierce with railgun without using overclock, which in fairness, I didn't even know that overclock actually gave you piercing shots. I remember seeing railgun shots pierce early on in Overwatch 2, but considering that I, tested it later and I didn't have it anymore, I assumed it got removed at some point. I didn't realize it was only when overclock was active, so I guess that's cool to know. But yeah, now you don't even need overclock active. The railgun will pierce through multiple people, with or without. I know that is technically like a sneak buff, but I don't mind it so much because that's kind of like a skillful addition, if you know what I mean, where it's like, if you can line up two targets next to each other, like, you probably deserve to land the shot. Although I will say I don't know if they really needed to buff overclock with the faster charge rate, but yeah. Either way, I do actually think these changes will severely, help with Sojourn's problem, where she's literally terrible at every rank except Masters and Grandmaster, at which point she's the most stupidly broken DPS in the game, and it's literally just, you're kind of throwing if you're not playing Sojourn. Almost all the time in almost every situation, The fact that this is, if this works, this will literally be the first time in Overwatch 2's history that Sojourn hasn't been hard meta, by the way. That's why we needed this nerf. But yeah, hopefully it's enough. Oh my god, man, Symmetra. Oh my god, the devs have no idea what they're doing with Symmetra, and I fucking hate it. Okay, during Season 8, while everyone else was miserable in Season 8. Season 8, Symmetra actually enjoyed a brief period of being an interestingly, like, in an interesting spot where they were kind of actually good for once. You know how Symmetra is, like, usually just the black sheep of the franchise, and she's never good for anything except the weirdly specific rollouts, but at the end of the day, no one really plays her. Yeah, there was actually a period in which Symmetra was a decent character if you knew how to play her. Obviously, not many people knew how to play her, but I loved playing Symmetra during Season 8. And that was for a few reasons. Her secondary fire was able to two-shot, which meant that she actually was able to fight at long range, especially because her secondary fire also moved a lot faster. As a result, you could actually kind of play solo queue Symmetra. You could either play her as a flanker, or as a sort of unique DPS that would, like, deny enemy sightlines more than take advantage of sightlines on by herself. And her main kind of power was the fact that using teleporter, she could control multiple angles at once. As well as that, they also had shifted power away from her sentries, so as a result, she wasn't just a character where you set up 3 sentries and farm kills off of them at low ranks. That doesn't work anymore, and that's a good thing that it doesn't work anymore. And then Season 9 came, and again, I love Season 9, but I have to ask, I know that burst damage is bad, and I was complaining about burst damage, and I'm glad that we have less burst damage in the game, but I have to ask, when we were complaining about burst damage, did a single fucking one of us mean Symmetra right-click? Serious question. Did a single person on this planet think that Symmetra right-click was the problem with burst damage in Overwatch? No. We thought it was Hanzo arrows, we thought it was Widow headshots, we thought it was Zen's Discord, we thought it was Kiriko's kunais. No one, when they talk about burst damage being too oppressive in Overwatch, is talking about Symmetra's right-click. Why, then, is Symmetra still stuck with a 3-shot secondary fire? Like, at this point, like, genuinely, I hate to say it, because it's so dumb, but, like, I genuinely have no idea what else to make of this. I think the devs just literally no one plays Symmetra and no one even understands how the character works, and I genuinely don't even know if they're aware that the reason that Symmetra is shit all of a sudden is because she can't two-shot anymore. I am genuinely at the point where there is so little thought being put into these patch notes, I am not even convinced that they are aware that this character cannot two-shot anymore, and that's why they are a failure. And despite that, ever since the Season 9 changes, every change they've made to Symmetra has been nothing but promoting the brain-dead beam playstyle of Symmetra. Not the big brain flank playstyle of Symmetra, not the team play Symmetra, not this, like, multi-angle, like, almost mini-sniper Symmetra, not really a sniper, but, like, more like sightline denial, with, like, all your big projectiles and all that. Not the actually cool and fun versions of Symmetra you could kind of make work in solo queue. No. They want the only version of Symmetra you can play to be the version of Symmetra that hides behind a Rhine shield and runs at people holding left click. And that's what they've been doing. They've been making her secondary fire even worse, they've been making her turrets even worse, but you know what they haven't been making worse? They've been making her beam better with every single patch, and giving her more health. So here we are, 25 extra health and more beam charge. Lovely! I can't wait to go back to playing Symmetra and having more fun now that the only thing I can do is hold left click and run at people and hope they die. I love that Symmetra is more and more becoming a brain-dead character where you just hold left click and run at people. You know what? We didn't need the version of Symmetra that actually had to consider her unique advantage, the fact that she provides more multi-angle control in a single character than anyone else in the game. No, we don't need to actually build off of that unique aspect of the fucking Architect character. No, the Architect character should just be the funny beam character that runs at people and holds left click. What the fuck, man? This is so bad. This is actually brain dead. Okay. Support. What am I looking at, man? What am I looking at? Developer comments. Illari's healing pylon is intended to be useful for healing her team in relatively safe positions, without much focus required, which enables her to either apply pressure with a primary fire, or spot heal in bursts from her more limited secondary fire healing beam. To encourage this, it now has improved health and healing output, but is less effective when Illari uses it to heal herself. Also, they buffed the damage that Outburst does. What a meaningful and impactful change. So let me sit here and explain why this change is terrible. Do you remember ages ago when I was talking about the fact that if you want to destroy a healing pylon as Winston, you have to sit there and go 1 charge shot, 2 charge shots, 3 charge shots to destroy 1 healing pylon. Do you remember back, I think this was Season 7 in the Group Up podcast, when Bogo was saying that as Winston, he often has to initiate an entire dive just to destroy 1 single fucking healing pylon, only to then jump out, get healed, and go back in. And how I said I realized how hilarious that is to think about, considering the cooldown of healing pylon was 12 seconds, and the cooldown of Winston leap was 6 seconds, and you would have to use leap twice, once to get out and once to get back in, meaning that literally every time you dive Illari, she just has another pylon, but also Pylon had so much health that you had to literally dive an entire fucking pylon instead of actually killing any people. You just had to kill Pylon with your dives. Do you remember that whole spiel? Do you remember how happy I was when Heal Pylon got reduced to 100 HP so that Winston could finally 2-shot it, and it was actually a bit more fragile? Do you remember how happy I was when they made it so that the cooldown for Heal Pylon was a little bit longer so that dive characters could actually come in and get out? And do you remember my opinion on Illari? I kind of hate that I keep having to restate this. Maybe I just have to make this a separate video at some point, because I'm surprised how often it comes up. This is my take on Illari, and it's not moving. I think actually a lot of people are wrong about Illari. A lot of people like to say that she's just straight up broken, and I completely disagree with that. People say she does way too much damage, and while she does get high damage numbers on the scoreboard, she actually doesn't do anywhere near as much DPS as a lot of other supports in the game. Bap has better DPS. Zen has better DPS. Situation dependent, Kiriko has better DPS. There are other DPSs in the game that have more DPS than Illari. What's really impressive about Illari is the fact that Healing Pylon is free and automatic, constant, never-ending healing, just for existing. That's the problem. Because that means that having a Healing Pylon that doesn't get broken set up means that you're playing a 6 versus 5 game. The Healing Pylon is your second support, and your other support is... yeah, you get the idea. The Illari herself basically plays as a DPS with a bit of healing on the side. I mean, the heal beam, the right click, is valuable depending on the circumstances, but certainly a default game plan, you don't plan to use it. It's a sort of as situations arise sort of thing. In terms of your actual gameplay as Illari, yeah, you basically just do play Illari as a Cass who just so happens to have a healing pylon that does all the healing for you. In fact, that is literally the reason why Illari can be oppressive. The reason that Illari can be oppressive is because she turns the game into a 6 versus 5, where your little healing pylon basically acts as a free mercy pocket all game, whereas you still get to be a Cass, meaning that your team effectively has 3 DPSs while still having 2 supports. And the fact that you have 3 DPSs means that instead of only being able to take 2 angles, you can now take 3. And once you have 3 angles of pressure from multiple different directions, Illari just firing constantly from an off angle can make it so that the opponents basically can't hide anywhere from the damage of your team. This is how Illari becomes overpowered. So, does that mean she's just broken? I mean, I said I disagree with that. I disagree with that because I think that, like many things in this game at this point, Illari can just be shut off. She's overpowered as you let her be, but how do you shut her off? You dive her. And that's how it should be. She's a poke character, she should be countered by dive. What should happen is, dive characters should be able to destroy healing pylon. That's how it should work. And if you can't keep your healing pylon down, then you're essentially playing still with 3 DPS, but now with only 1 support. And 3 DPS and 1 support is worse than 2 DPS and 2 supports. So, essentially, you're handicapping your team as Illari if you can't keep a pylon up, but if you can keep a pylon up, then you're overpowered, just for existing. You don't even have to do that much with Illari. You don't have to land loads of headshots, just so long as you do some decent poke damage and don't feed. Like, literally, just exist as Illari and have a healing pylon up, and you're overpowered. But if someone decides they just want to hard dive your pylon all game, you can't do shit about it, and your character's turned off. And it's one of those things where, like, I don't think that's good, but I also think that might be the healthiest state you can have Illari in, and I hate that I keep having to say that about so many characters. There's just so many characters in this game that just have problems where it's literally just like, this is the healthiest state they can be in, and even this is dumb, you know? And I think Illari is an example of that. So with all that said, why are these changes so bad? Well, for one, doesn't this just mean that now it's going to be way harder to dive healing pylon, which means you can't counter Illari, which means she goes back to being overpowered? Like, that doesn't seem good. Especially considering that they didn't seem to substantially nerf Cass, so I think Cass is still going to be meta. And considering they buffed Orisa, looks like we're going into a poke meta. I wouldn't be surprised if this season's just a retread of Season 6. I would not be that surprised if the meta, team this season ends up being, Illari with Orisa and Cass. I'm not sure what the other DPS would be, I admit, because I would say Soujorn, but the Soujorn nerfs might actually kick Soujorn out of favor. And if it does, then, I don't know, maybe the other DPS ends up being Sombra, because although that is a dive character, you can still sort of poke with Sombra when you need to, and again, we're probably at least going to have a little bit of dive poke hybrid, so to speak. Maybe I'm being a bit far-fetched there, but either way, the other 4 characters are pretty hard locked in.
But here's the bit that really gets me. 40 fucking healing per projectile. Are you fucking serious, man? You've got to be joking. You actually have to be joking. You cannot be serious. So, when Illari first dropped, her healing pylon healed a little bit faster than a mercy beam. With 40 healing per projectile, I think Illari's healing pylon now will heal faster than a mercy beam. You literally out-heal mercy using Illari with a fucking pylon. You don't even have to right-click and you out-heal mercy on Illari now. And we increase pylon's health. What? And the worst part is, you might say, oh, but look, they compensated or nerfed it, they made it so that Pylon heals, Illari's self less. That's good, right? No, honestly. One of the only things about Illari that was kind of cool in skill testing was the whole taking off angles. And the main reason you could get away with taking off angles without dying for it as Illari was because if you got in trouble, you could use Outburst to get away and retreat to your healing pylon to get healed and take the fight in a more safe location. As a result, so long as you were only 1 outburst away from a safe location, you could be aggressive and take off angles to take areas of the map away from the enemy's control. That was actually one of the few skill testing and cool parts of Illari. But if Illari is going to receive literally half healing from her own pylon, she can't make risky plays anymore. She has to play it safe all the time. Which means that she doesn't get to express her skill as much. Once again, they just keep giving supports free value and taking away their playmaking opportunities. Literally, 90% of Illari's power is just Pylon now. I'm not kidding. I feel like at this point, so long as you don't literally feed all game, you can do terribly as Illari in terms of your pure skill, but so long as you have a healing Pylon set up and you don't die that much, I feel like you cannot physically do bad on Illari anymore. Aim has always been my weakest suit in this game, and yet Illari, as the quote-unquote DPS aim-based support, is still somehow one of my highest win rate characters in this entire game. And I don't think that's because I'm good at Illari. I think it's because if you just get to place a healing pylon and no one breaks it, it's kind of a free win. And it used to be easy to break it, at least if you tried, but now it's not gonna be. And it's gonna heal more, so not breaking it won't even really be an option. What? Oh, not to mention, I just realized I did not even think about this. Fun fact, in Season 10, Illari was the 3rd highest win rate support in Grandmaster. I checked on Overbuff, and yes, by the way, the developers at this point have basically confirmed that Overbuff is pretty accurate. Obviously not as accurate as their internal stats that we never get to see, but very close to their internal stats. So yeah, according to Overbuff, which in their recent Reddit AMA, the devs literally confirmed is a pretty accurate source for statistics on Overwatch, according to Overbuff, Illari is literally already the 3rd strongest support in the game, and we're buffing her. Cool. Okay, finally, some kind of good news, although weird news as well. Kiriko got nerfed. But this is weird. I'm never going to be mad about a Kiriko nerf, but I'm going to drop a bit of a hot take, maybe. I despise Kiriko. That's not the hot take, by the way. I despise Kiriko, as you know, and I genuinely think that she is the worst design character ever added to this game. So much so, I think she's worse than Mauga. I think Mauga's, 2nd worst. I think, if there's 2 characters that need to be deleted from the game, it's Kiriko and Mauga. But I genuinely think Kiriko has contributed more harm to the game than Mauga. And I will die on that hill. But with all that said, I think Kiriko's overrated. I think ever since Season 9, Kiriko's secretly been kind of shit, but everyone's kind of, I'm not gonna lie, been fucking sheeple, I guess, and just bought into the narrative that Kiriko's OP because Kiriko's annoying. And don't get me wrong, Kiriko's fucking annoying, and literally, like, there's no counterplay to anything she does, and she does basically just ruin the experience for everyone. But that doesn't mean she's strong. The fact that she's easier to shoot in Season 9 screws her. The fact that people get anti-healed when they get shot makes single-target healers like her suffer. The fact that everyone has more health means you can't two-shot with kunais anymore, which screws her. And I'm glad she's getting screwed, but I'm just saying, ever since Season 9, I think Kiriko's secretly been kind of low-key garbage. But everyone's always been coping and saying, no, Lucio Kiriko's the meta, Lucio Kiriko's so overpowered, Lucio Kiriko's so good, man. You don't understand, Kiriko's just like a high-skill character, man. It's just at like high ranks. Kiriko's so good. And don't get me wrong, Kiriko has much lower win rates at lower ranks, but I've never even bought into the narrative that Kiriko's just a high-skill character that only big-brain players understand. I've already mentioned before, I literally think Kiriko is one of the lowest skill supports in this game. As someone who has an embarrassing amount of playtime on Kiriko, I hate playing Kiriko, but I have to swap to Kiriko so often at this point. And I can say from experience, given I have about 50 hours in the character at this rate, that yeah, Kiriko's a pretty fucking brain-dead character. But here's the thing. Have you actually looked at the win rates for Kiriko? They're not very good. Not even at Grandmaster. Don't get me wrong, they're not even positive until you get to, like, Masters. But at Grandmaster, this past season, Kiriko's win rate has been the 4th worst out of all supports. Her win rate has been barely above 50%. And that's at Grandmaster, where the average win rate is usually more like 52%-ish, because obviously if you're at Grandmaster, you're winning more games than you're losing. Kiri is quite literally bottom 4 in the game right now, statistically speaking, and while statistics aren't everything, I think considering that that's consistent with how terrible she's been in Season 9 as well, I think it's safe to say Kiriko's been severely overrated recently. And there's a reason I'm bringing this up, because it's coming around to a point we're going to get to later. But either way, let's talk about the nerfs themselves. Swift Step getting a longer cooldown? Absolutely. Come on, like, this should have happened ages ago. I'm sorry, I'm not even saying this is like a balance thing, it's just a pure design thing. Who the fuck's idea was it to give a support an invincibility frames teleport through walls every 7 seconds? That was stupid. 8 seconds is still pretty stupid. This should be like 10 plus seconds at minimum. But whatever. I'll take what I can get. 8 seconds. And Suzu got a change that I'm mixed on. I like that Suzu is getting less overpowered, but I also don't think this change is very good, quote-unquote. Now Suzu no longer reverts hard knockdown stuns. Now, I'm pretty sure that the developers have never used this term before and have made it up for this change specifically, but they do explain it, and they say that it refers to most of all the existing knockback down, but let me try that one again. It refers to most of all the existing knockdowns where the player is stunned and laying on the ground, such as Reinhardt's Earth Shatter, and I imagine the kind of things where, like, 2 people clank their charges, like we saw at the start of the patch notes, would count as well. With the exception of Anna's Sleep Dart effect, which is removed upon taking damage or protection Suzu's cleanse. So, other stuns will still be cleansed by Suzu, but, like, literally you're on the floor kind of stun, that kind of stun won't be cleansable with Suzu. That's good, question mark, but, like, I feel like this is kind of a dumb distinction, if you know what I mean. Like, why do we have to have a thing that, like, says doesn't cleanse, like, knockdown stuff? Can we not just say that Suzu doesn't cleanse stun? Because I feel like that's just, from the beginning, is kind of dumb, you know? I don't think Suzu cleansing stun is a good... Like, does Suzu really need more power? Like, Suzu is quite possibly the single most broken cooldown in the game. Like, you know what? No, I'll die on that hill. I'll stick to my guns. People tried to counter-argue this in, like, my Kiriko rant ages ago, and they got cooked in the comments, and it was right that it happened. I'm sorry. I'm going to stick to my guns on this one. Protection Suzu is literally near the power of an ultimate, and in the cases of some of the weaker ultimates in the game, it literally is better than some ultimates on a fucking, 15-second cooldown? Sure, that sounds fair. A cooldown that can instantly negate Rampage, one of the most powerful and expensive ults in the game. A cooldown that used to, until this patch, be able to completely undo an entire Earth Shatter. A 15-second cooldown that almost always denies any kills from a Graviton Surge. Quite literally, we are talking about a 15-second cooldown which consistently, on a regular basis, shuts down entire team kill ults just with one 15-second cooldown. Suzu's actually like the dumbest ability ever added to this game. And people will say, oh, but it takes skill, it takes timing, and I don't know, man. Am I being too elitist here? I swear the timing for Suzu's fucking easy. Like, I don't know, sometimes I miss it on a flux, and if you something like a Junkrat tire where they could detonate at any moment, then it's harder. But like every other ult in the game, man, I swear it's so easy to Suzu someone to save their lives. It's not hard. I barely even consider it like a skill. I mean, yeah, it is a skill, but it's a very baseline skill. Ugh, anyway, sorry, I'm turning this into another Kiriko rant now. Point being, yeah, I don't think these are bad changes, but I also think they're light slaps on the wrist, and again, because Kiriko's so stupidly designed, it's like, it sounds like I'm kind of contradicting myself here, because I'm like, oh, she's underpowered and overrated, but actually also they should have nerfed her more. But it's kind of like, just because, like, it's not like a thing of, like, I think that nerfing her more would make her more balanced. I think it's that, like, she shouldn't even be a good character at any time until her design gets fixed, which is probably never going to happen. Like, she's just such a poorly designed character, she should never be allowed to be good. Not unless they, you know, actually fix her, but they won't. Because so much about her that's broken is so fundamental to her identity that literally to fix her, you'd basically have to make a new character. Okay, so it looks like that's the end of the patch notes. We got a Mac rework to Colloseo over here as well. They removed the glass. I'll be quite quick with this. They removed the glass here, which most people wanted. I will say this. I kind of like the glass. But I also acknowledge that I'm not in the majority here, so I'm not going to die on that hill. I like the glass because I feel like it adds an extra layer of skill if you're playing characters like Sombra or Farah or Echo, basically vertical mobility characters. I love being able to abuse, like, you know, my mobility to, like, switch between the sides of the glass. But I understand that to people who don't have that vertical mobility, it's very oppressive, and while part of me wants to say skill issue, I do realize the fact that the glass exists is what makes, like, the beginning of Colloseo so miserable. Because let's be real, we all hate Colloseo for the same reason. None of us like that the start of Colloseo is always two snipers staring at each other, missing 50 shots in a row, until finally someone lands a headshot, and then the other team loses the team fight because one headshot got landed, but that was almost half the time, half luck. You know, this team fight at first point is always a stalemate for ages in Colloseo, until someone lands a stray headshot out of nowhere that honestly was probably mostly luck, and then suddenly that one team that got the lucky headshot gets loads of momentum. So I will say, as much as I'm gonna miss using creative plays with the glass and all that, at the same time I'm glad that it means that this team fight is gonna be less, like, painful, you know, at the start. Anyway, there's also a bit of extra cover added here. I must admit, I don't think this was super necessary, but I'm not complaining. Like, I don't think it's a bad thing, I just don't think they needed to do this. You also can't see in this image, but I saw in some other footage that there's now going to be a new doorway in this health pack room over there, which leads to the little... I don't even know if you'll know what I'm talking about, but there's a little sneaky little high ground in the small health pack room that's like, you know... in the little building outside of your spawn. And essentially there's a doorway that leads to that high ground, whereas before you had to be a vertical mobility character to reach it. Yeah, this is the high ground I'm on about. This building, this like small health pack building, actually has always had a high ground here, if you never noticed. It's just that no one ever goes in it because you can only see very little of the map from it, and you have to be a character that can fly or something like that to be able to reach it in the first place. There was no way to reach it before. In the rework version, there's a doorway back here that leads into the high ground, so you can get there on your own, and there's a staircase here, so it's not even really a high ground anymore. I am going to miss that a little bit, I will admit. I do wish they didn't add this staircase here, but... whatever. Other than that, this is nice. This part used to be really cramped, and this railing was really dumb. There was lots of inconsistent behavior as well. Like, for example, I remember one time, literally, I did a punch as Doomfist, an empowered punch from, like, all the way over here, like, on the other side of the bridge, and I literally went over the side of the railing and fell off, even though there's a wall here and I didn't press jump. And it's just, like, sometimes, like, you just go through the wall. Like, you just go up a teeny bit and through the wall. So I'm glad that that's not going to be an issue anymore. That's nice to see. And of course we got the new map, Runasapi, although we don't have any images here. Okay, right. Last points about the video. Okay. Okay. I think there's two possible support metas. I think the support meta, I think Lucio's finally going to fall out of favour, potentially. I think Lucio's still strong, but, like, I think that Moira isn't super strong anymore, and Kiriko isn't really good, and this makes her even worse. So there isn't really a good support to pair with Lucio anymore, and when you combine that with the nerfs he already received, although I don't think he'll be a bad support, I don't think he'll be run anymore, just because there's no one good to run with him. As well as that, everything I'm seeing here, I hate to say it, man, I think we're looking at a poke meta. I think we're looking at a retread of Season 6. I think Orisa is going to be the meta tank. I think that the meta support comp is going to be like 50-50 between Bap Illari again, like in Season 6, or something else, which we'll get to us in a second. And I think that Cass is still going to be the dominant DPS in the game. And other than that, it's just generally going to be an assortment of poke DPS. I don't think Dive is quite dead, but I think that Dive is looking to be struggling in this patch. But last thing... what's the other support duo I could see becoming meta? Well, you know how earlier I said I checked Overbuff towards the end of Season 10? To see that a lot of people, honestly, the narratives they said about which supports were strong weren't really true anymore. Everyone said Lucio Kiriko's broken. So broken. Best support duo in the game. So overpowered. And yet, when I looked at the win rates, Lucio was pretty high, but even still, he was only 4th. And as I mentioned, Kiriko was 4th worst. So... who are the best supports? Well, I already mentioned Illari was 3rd. Who was 1st and 2nd? Well, I'm starting to feel vindicated. Because this whole time I've been trying to say, Brig's really strong, guys. The only reason that Brig isn't overpowered and isn't taking over the meta is because of the fact that Brig is terrible with Moira, Kiriko, and Lucio. And what are you seeing everywhere right now? Moira, Kiriko, and Lucio. If you're running Brig with a Zen or Brig with an Ana, Brig's insane. Now, in fairness, Anna's not been having a good time recently. She's really been struggling. So Brig Anna is a little bit out of the picture. But what about Brig Zen? Brig Zen has been meta more than a couple times. And not only is Brig ludicrously overtuned right now, we just haven't seen it because the supports that she's often been forced to play with are terrible with Brig. We're now also seeing Zen. Well, we're not seeing much of him, but if you actually look at the win rates... Zenyatta is the 2nd highest win rate support in Grandmaster, or at least he was in Season 10. You know, no one's talking about how OP Zen is, but when you think about it, remember how OP Zen was the second Season 9 started? Do you know how many changes he's received since then? The only thing they changed is they slightly reduced the knockback on his kick, and they took 25 health away from him. He still has Discord Orb, he still has huge orbs, he still does loads of damage, he still has the buffs to Harmony Orb, which lets it persist for 5 whole seconds, even after you lose LOS on a target. In fact, now that you have Venture, I'm pretty sure Harmony Orb is the only thing in the game that can heal Venture while they're underground. And then throw into the mix the fact that the main reason that Zen fell out of favour was because it was a hard dive meta, which is what counters Zen, and now it looks like we're going to be losing a bit of dive and power and getting a bit more power in poke, the kind of comp Zen would already be running. Oh shit. It's looking a little scary. Those armor changes also made Brig better against flankers. If a Tracer starts coming for your Zen, and you've got a Brig to protect them, they're going to have to get through the Brig's armor, meaning that the Brig has essentially double health when they still have armor against the Tracer. They're going to have to get past the Brig shield. They're going to have to deal with the fact that the Brig literally has, I'm not joking, 30% more healing than she had a couple patches ago. Friendly reminder, the DPS passive is minus 20% healing. Brig has gotten plus 30% healing since. Like, think about how much minus 20% healing with the DPS passive changed the game, and then think about the fact that Brig just has plus 30% healing on heal packs at all times now compared to only a couple months ago. And really think about how much that changes things. And then when you add all of that on top of the fact that now Brig gets a free bash reset when she pops a roll, meaning she can now combo bash into whip shot into like ult then bash again for a like combo that one-shots, well not one-shots, but you know, kills most DPS in the game, and if it doesn't kill them, stuns them with 1 health remaining. Brig is stupid right now, and Zen has always been stupid in Season 9 onwards. We just didn't get to see it because Dive was prevalent enough to keep Zen out of the meta and keep him in check. But if Dive falls out of favour, which it looks like it might do with all the things that are being added to the game to punish it, it looks like we could be in for a very, very stale, very pokey meta. As I say, I am certain Orisa is going to be the meta tank, unfortunately, and I hate saying it. And whether the support duo is Bap Illari or Brig Zen, I don't know, it could be either one. Maybe it's both, honestly. It could be both. But either way, you're going to have a really stationary, sit way in the back, be super tanky and never die and do loads of damage from a safe distance kind of support backline. And you're still going to see Cass everywhere. So, yeah, this is bad. This is, like, really bad. Like, holy fuck. Yeah, I want to try and see some way out of this, but this just looks shit. This just has shit written all over it. I think that's my video. I think I'm done.